a lot of that core structure continues to exist. And we've seen lots of really great changes in legal education, which is why I think it's a little different from an innovator's dilemma situation where there's been no change at all. We've had the rise of clinical programs. We've had the rise of legal writing as a core part of training new law students to prepare for entering practice. So it's not as though it's pure theory all the time in law school. And I'll cite my friend and colleague, Alice Armitage, who recently stepped down from her long-term role at UC San Francisco. And Alice has talked about how the first year in particular, which is the year when everything is required and consistent across the board, is really designed to produce appellate lawyers in the way that we teach appellate case law and the way that we focus on oral argument when most people are not going to pursue careers in appellate law. So I think that there are elements that really structurally impede us from responding quickly to the moment. But I would love to hear your thoughts about whether you think that law schools suffer from innovator's dilemma or whether they're different in some ways than other organizations.
I do think that they're different in some important ways and then not different in some ways that make this an opportunity for some disruption in the legal education market, which is separate from, I think, the rest of the legal market. But it still is a market. Consumers are still making choices about where they want to spend a whole lot of tuition dollars. Welcome to 2030 Vision. AI and the Future of Law, your go-to podcast focused on exploring the transformative impact of artificial intelligence on the legal industry. We're your hosts, Bridget McCormack and Jen Leonard, and together we'll navigate the rapidly evolving landscape of artificial intelligence, uncovering the opportunities, addressing the risks, and imagining the future.
In each episode, we bring you insightful discussions about cutting-edge technologies, the latest trends, actionable strategies, case studies, and novel insights that help your organization imagine its own future.
Whether you're a legal professional, a tech enthusiast, or simply curious about the future of law, this podcast is your gateway to understanding the profound changes AI will bring to the profession. Join us as we scale education and empower the legal community to thrive in an era of unprecedented innovation.
Welcome to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode of 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. I am one of your co-hosts, Jen Leonard, founder of Creative Lawyers, and I am thrilled, as always, to be joined by Bridget McCormack, President and CEO of the American Arbitration Association. Today, Bridget and I are going to talk about the implications of AI on legal education, an area where we've both spent some time and focus, and Bridget continues to focus in some of her activities on this topic. And before we jump into legal education, we will start, as always, with our two headline activities, which are sharing a couple of definitions with everybody about AI that you might hear as you're learning more about it and what they mean. And then our Gen AI moments of the week, which we are actually going to rebrand this week in response to a reader or listener comment. So I'm going to turn it to Bridget to sort of kick us off on definitions, and we'll go from there.
Excellent. It's great to see you. It was wonderful to see you in person last week at Whipple. That was really fun. And Kat Casey was really fun to talk to about the way AI is changing the profession. We should figure out how to collaborate with her more often. I liked her a lot.
Totally. That was so fun. And you did such a great job introducing the amazing Venus Williams to talk about resilience and growth mindset and all of those things. That must have been fun.
It was really fun. She's amazing. I was really, really, really rapt by her discussion. It was great.
Yeah.
All right. So kicking off the legal education episode, I'm excited to talk about this topic. You and I both, as you said, have spent a lot of time in legal education. In fact, I feel like I spent one of my, one long chapter of my career, a decade and a half as a full-time faculty member at Michigan. And then you and I have taught together at Penn, and you spent, 10 years at Penn, longer. So we both care a lot about legal education and helping, law students succeed. And so this is a topic I think is close to both of our hearts. But as always, let's start with our regular segments. First, definitions. And the first one I want to ask you about, Jen, is AI washing, which is a term I'm hearing more and more. What does that refer to?
Yeah, I'm also hearing it more and more. And I'm also going to give credit to Stephanie Wilkins, the fabulous legal tech reporter who recently, just yesterday, announced that she's moving on to her next chapter from American legal media, but has done a fabulous job covering technology, especially over the last couple of years. And she has a great online AI glossary. So if you find her on LinkedIn, you can link to it. But she includes AI washing, which is related somewhat to greenwashing, which we might have heard of in other contexts, which was the idea that companies overstate the environmental sustainability of their products in an effort to sell more products to consumers who are unaware of the real environmental harms that they might be causing. So AI washing is similar, but it's just in the AI context. So it's companies overstating or over exaggerating the capabilities or use of artificial intelligence in their products. I think this is particularly important for lawyers because there is this sort of resurgence and repackaging of tools that already existed on the market that might actually be historical AI tools, but not generative AI tools, and are now being sort of flooding the inboxes of lawyers with claims that they use generative AI to do all sorts of things. And I've heard a lot of disappointed consumers in the legal industry who were unaware of the limitations of some of the products that are being pitched to them. So that is what AI washing is. I've seen that there are some FTC efforts to sort of curb AI washing. The Do Not Pay Robo Lawyer is one of the targets of some of that activity. So I think we'll continue to hear more about this as consumer protection agencies and groups get involved. So that is AI washing. But what about context window, Bridget? What we'll hear more about this every time a new model comes out. But what is a context window?
Yeah, that's exactly when you hear about it. When there's a new model, we hear about what the context window is, and it's the model, the large language model's working memory, meaning the amount of information it can take in and consider at once when making a particular decision or giving a particular answer. So some of the newer models right now have context windows of up to 100,000 or 200,000 tokens, which I am told translates to being able to comprehend about up to, I guess, 300 pages of text in a single prompt. That's an awful lot of text to be able to upload to a model to have it consider in answering your questions. But apparently, it's just the beginning, and we're going to see the context windows grow as the models grow. So that's what we mean by, or not we, that's what people mean by context window. So next segment is our Gen AI moments of the week, and we had an interesting comment from a listener about this topic. Do you want to tell us about that, Jen?
Yeah, so a shout out to Megan McMillan, who works in AI development at Cleary. Megan commented on one of our recent episodes that she really loves this part of the segment, but she wasn't sure exactly what we call it. And it made me think maybe we need a little bit of a rebrand to make it an easy hook for people to listen to. So I did what both of us tend to do these days. I asked Claude for some ideas for rebranding our Gen AI Moment of the Week segment. So would you like to hear what Claude came up with, Bridget?
Yeah. What did Claude recommend?
Okay, so here are a few suggestions from Claude. The first is the AI aha moment. The next was robo revelation. Claude also suggested neural net nugget, which is very clever, but also kind of difficult to say. The other one that we kind of liked is machine learning magic. And then there were AI assist of the week and deep learning delight. So very creative. I think some people don't really understand how creative generative AI can be. But are there any that you like in particular that we could use going forward?
I kind of like them all. And I was taken with machine learning magic right away because I don't know, it feels like magic to me when I use these tools, so it felt genuine. But I think so many of the tools are not necessarily about machine learning, and they certainly are changing so quickly that I think I like AI aha the best because it feels like a broad enough term to capture all of the different examples you and I seem to talk about in this segment. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I really liked AI aha as well. And there's an exclamation point that Claude included. So when we say it, it will be obvious that it's an AI aha. Very exciting. So thank you to Megan for pointing out the opportunity to rebrand. So going forward, we'll have our AI ahas. So, Bridget, do you want to share what your AI aha was since
I
our last recording?
Yeah, I do. I love this one. Although I feel like there were so many things this week, so many new tools this week that I haven't actually had a time to catch up with. So our next episode, I think I'll have a lot to choose from. But I have a great one this week. My chief of staff, who's amazing, Chris Roy, did a used an AI tool to create professional headshots for herself. And I'm sure there are many of these, so I don't mean to be, promoting one in particular, but the one she used was Insta Headshots. And here's how it worked. It asked her to upload 10 photos just from her iPhone, or from her phone, selfies. They didn't want them in groups, so she had to find, just photos of herself. As she called them, they were kind of janky photos, like nothing, none of them were like especially great photos of her. The tool would reject ones that it couldn't work with. But so eventually, she found 10 selfies and uploaded them all. And then it produces 100 professional headshots that look so incredible. I mean, she's beautiful to begin with. Chris is amazing, but these headshots look fantastic. And I think the cost was like $65. I mean, it was definitely under $75. And it did it in about 10 seconds. So in 10 seconds, she had all of these like wonderful choices for professional headshots. So how we roll at the AAA. We went ahead and just bought a bunch of licenses and offered them to all of our executives who are actually any employees who are like, public facing. We said, we have this great new tool. You can use it in 5 minutes. Let us know if you want it, and we'll send you a license. So we just got it for everybody, so everybody could upgrade their headshots. And I don't know about you, but the last time I had to have headshots taken, I loved the photographer who did it. She was wonderful. She knew I hated the whole process. I mean, she wanted me to do hair and makeup. That just doesn't come naturally to me. I don't like it. Changing clothes, I don't even like. I mean, it was it's like awful for me. And so I feel like it was so hard on her to get everything out of me to like to get me some good headshots. This is the most exciting thing to me. I will probably always just use Insta headshots. And I send them to you. Didn't you think they looked kind of amazing?
Oh my gosh. They look incredible. And I think my immediate reaction was there's another industry disrupted just for the reasons that you're saying. The last time I had headshots taken, they were hundreds of dollars. And I really liked the photographer as well, but had to drive to a location, get all the pre-work done, think through outfits and hair and makeup like you're saying. To have a workaround if you don't like that process seems incredible to me. But they looked incredible. So if Chris is listening, love them. You always look great. But I was really, really blown away by the quality and also the realism of the
Yeah.
photos.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's very
They
cool.
all look like AI generated photos. They look incredible. Yeah. How about you? What's your
Totally.
AI aha for this week?
So a lot of people might be reading, if you're following the AI world, about Google's Notebook LM offering. And I had heard a few people that we follow on different podcasts talking about it. And I asked ChatGPT how to get access to it, found the URL. And so Notebook LM is powered by Google Gemini 1.5, I believe, which is their most cutting edge model. And essentially, you can create these little notebooks, they're called, that organize a whole bunch of content. So you can upload audio files, PDF documents, Google documents if you use Google Drive, and you can do various things with them once you upload them. So you can generate FAQs if you want to, or you can ask it to summarize the content. But the coolest feature is you can press this button called podcast. It just says podcast, and it takes a few minutes, which is a little unusual for AI world. Like, I'm getting so spoiled now. I expect everything immediately. But after a few minutes, it will create a podcast that sounds like two people, and it really sounds human. Like, they use filler words, they use likes and ums, they step on each other's lines, they're very exclamatory at different points, and they talk about the information that you've fed the notebook. So my colleague, Marielle, whom you know, we uploaded together to test this an outline that we usually use for our Gen AI presentations, and then created a podcast. And it was so eerie. It's these two people, and they started it and they said, we talk a lot about AI on this show, like this show that didn't exist until we hit podcast. And this week, we're going to do a deep dive into an industry that is really primed for impact from AI, the legal profession. And it went through like all of the things in our outline, and it expanded on the bullet points in ways that were really, really nuanced and accurate. There were a couple places where it used terminology that maybe wasn't perfect. Like I think it said like practice focus instead of practice areas or something like that. But I mean, very, very minor adjustments. And I've had friends who have told me that they have been using Notebook LM podcasting to listen to legal documents or analysis of legal documents on their way to and from work while they're in the car, when they wouldn't have the opportunity to be actually reading the documents. And like we talked about, they will read the documents eventually, but it really helps them understand what's in them through conversation. Have you seen this, tried this?
I haven't tried it yet, but my team has, and I can't wait to. And we have a board retreat coming up in December, and one of the pre-listens we're going to give them is we're going to pick a couple of chapters from Frances Keller's book. Frances Keller we've talked about, was the founder of the AAA almost 100 years ago. Really, really fascinating woman, and she has a couple of books about why she founded the AAA. And we're gonna create a podcast out of a couple of the chapters for the board to listen to as they come into the retreat, which I think is kind of a cool a cool way to start the conversation.
That is very cool. You will be blown away by it. I just think it is the creepiest and also coolest thing I've seen AI do. I also thought, to segue into our topic for today of legal education, I was just thinking what a different world it would have been if I could have uploaded, a torts case to a podcast and then listened to people talk about it, as well as studying and briefing it the old-fashioned way. So I think it also opens up opportunities for neurodiverse learners, for people who, want to hear people discuss it maybe before going to class. But there are all sorts of applications coming out that I think will have exciting implications for legal education. So maybe we could move into our main topic for today. Bridget, maybe you could describe for listeners your role with the ABA, currently focused on legal education, and some of the work that the ABA did earlier this year on a report about law school preparedness for generative AI.
So I am the immediate past chair of the ABA section on legal education and admission to the bar, which is the accreditor for law schools. So I spend a lot of time on questions of accreditation. What does a law school need to be offering to be formally accredited? But this report that we're going to talk about was the result of another role that I have with the ABA right now. I'm on the task force on AI and law, and there's a couple of subcommittees that I sit on, and one of them is on legal education. It's a very small subcommittee. 3 of us are on it. Cynthia Swick, who is a lawyer who actually practices ADR, so I know Cynthia separately, and Andy Perlman, who is our friend and the dean of Suffolk Law School and a very innovative leader of a law school. And we decided that one of the things that our subcommittee could offer was just to try and figure out a state of the state of where law schools are in thinking about how to approach the fact that generative AI is changing the practice of law, the business of law, and sort of to see who's doing what about it yet. So we sent out a survey, as one does, to the almost 200, or maybe it is 200, law schools that are accredited across the country, asking a number of questions about how they are thinking about AI in their institutions, teaching, if at all, AI, and in what kinds of classes and what kinds of experiences, or otherwise sort of exposing students to this new technology that is poised to have such an important impact on the profession. So at the very top, I should say that only 29 schools completed the survey and responded to it, and obviously that is a very small number, and it means that there is obviously no way to take the survey results as really representative of what's happening, because who knows what's happening in the rest of them. My guess is, though, that the rest of the law schools likely didn't have a lot of answers to the questions because they just weren't doing anything yet, which is true across, as we know, true of lots of institutions within the legal profession. So not a critique, just I think probably a statement of where folks are. But so with that caveat of we only got 29 responses, I can talk a little bit about the responses that we did get and what we learned, but I'll pause for a minute in case you have any reactions to the low response rate.
Yeah, it was my biggest takeaway when the study came out. I saw all the headlines in various publications about, law schools are immediately responding to the Gen AI moment. Law schools have, a proliferation of course offerings, which I was very curious about because of my experience. Law schools don't necessarily change their curriculum overnight. There's a whole deliberative process. So when I dug into the study, I was not surprised to see that only 29 law schools responded. But I think the clarification is important because when I visit with law firms in particular, because they're reading the headlines and not the underlying report, their takeaway has sort of been like, we have confidence that the law schools are already responding and preparing students for a world transformed by generative AI. So I think it's important to understand that most law schools have not responded for the reasons that you have suggested. And I suspect that if you looked at the law schools that did respond, they're probably law schools where they've been building a muscle for quite some time in integrating technology into their curriculum, like a Suffolk, like you just mentioned, or Vanderbilt or Chicago Kent, those kinds of schools. So before we got into the results, I just thought it was important to highlight, especially for people that may not be that connected with the law school world.
Yeah, and one other related but slightly off topic thing I want to say at the top is that one of my last acts as chair of the section on legal education and admissions to the bar was to appoint a committee of council members to take a look at what this what AI should mean to the accreditor, and if there are ways in which the accreditor can make sure it plays a constructive role in getting law schools to address this change that's coming in the profession. And Justice Melissa Hart from the Colorado Supreme Court is leading that task force, and she's fantastic. So I'll be eager to see what they come up with in terms of ideas. Okay, back to the survey. So I'm just going to summarize a few of the findings. It's not very long if anybody wants to look at it, and easily findable online. But I can summarize the findings, and what might be more interesting is a couple of questions that it raises, I think, that you and I could discuss. So again, only of the 29 schools who responded, 55% said they offer classes dedicated to teaching about AI. Obviously, that could mean a lot of things, but that was the number. 83% said they provide opportunities for students to learn how to use AI tools. 85% are considering curriculum changes in response to the way AI is changing the profession. That actually surprised me as low. 85% of 29 are thinking about curricular changes, when it feels to me like everybody should be thinking about what it means for your curriculum. 69% of schools have updated their academic integrity policies, which of course is usually the first move we see in legal. Everyone sends out new policies about what you can't do with the technology. That's turns out to be true in a lot of law schools as well. 62% of law schools say they offer formal opportunities to learn about the use of AI in their first year curriculum, which again could mean a lot of things. It might mean part of your legal writing class is where you are introduced to some of the tools. that the schools all have diverse approaches. They're at lots of different stages, from proactive adoption to we're thinking about it, we're not sure what we're going to do yet. The changes that are happening span from reassessing evaluation methods to introducing brand new tools, and sort of flagging and talking about ethical considerations. 32% offer formal opportunities to engage with AI through partnerships with other university departments. I have to say, I do think this is one place where the universities that have a muscle for collaboration across units have an advantage, because you hear me say it. If you've heard me say it today, you've heard me say it every day. I think this is a moment for radical collaboration, and lawyers need partners to figure this out. So I think some of the universities who have those partners at the ready and have worked with them before have a real advantage. 62% of schools are undecided about whether they're going to let applicants use generative AI in applications. That actually kind of cracks me up a little bit. Like, I'm not sure how they let or don't let them. And 31% of the 29 respondents are explicitly prohibit its use in applications. Also makes me laugh a little bit. Anyway, so those are some of the things that we found from the schools that responded. And by the way, thank you to all the schools that did respond. I think that's, especially the ones that responded and said we're not doing it yet, that's important for us to know, and we appreciate it, having that information. But it raises a lot of interesting questions, I think. And one is, you and I have talked a lot about how legal institutions are at a moment where they are facing, the innovator's dilemma, the Clayton Christensen framework for what might happen when disruptive technology overtakes legacy successful institutions and processes. Do you think law schools fit that paradigm, or do you think they're just kind of outside it because they have such a different culture and incentive structure? What's your view on whether law schools also have to worry about being disrupted right now?
Yeah, I love that question. I do think that the framework of innovator's dilemma, in the sense that, when dominant institutions or the leading incumbents emerged, they were innovative in their DNA at the beginning. And my understanding from early legal education structures that gave way to modern law schools, it was an innovative approach. There were lots of really, really harmful parts of it that were designed around excluding people from the profession and requiring things that more regional schools couldn't provide, and in response to the American Association of Law Schools and the ABA at the time. But setting those aside for a minute, as important as they are, the idea really was to create space where students could focus on learning how to think like lawyers, learning critical thought processes and theory around the law. And then they would be sort of employed by, in the case of sort of the Cravath model of dividing practice and education, they would be employed by law firms who would then actually teach them the practical skills they needed to teach. And it was a really intentional divide that was trying to solve for the idea that it was complicated to learn both theory and practice at the same time. And it was done ad hoc in a local law office. So the initial structure was really innovative and worked really well, given the stakeholders that wanted to produce the results that they produced. But over time, the core structure, because of the focus on theory and the critical thought being central to the educational process, the core incentive and the core focus really was on the production of legal scholarship through the tenured faculty at a law school. And so the tenured faculty would research, produce scholarship that would drive the profession forward. And there would be these dedicated, really high level professionals to be able to think about the law itself. And also, this sort of coincided with the proliferation of regulations and laws in the early 20th century that really required having strong research capacity to understand and guide the profession. But today, a lot of that core structure continues to exist. And we've seen lots of really great changes in legal education, which is why I think it's a little different from an innovator's dilemma situation where there's been no change at all. We've had the rise of clinical programs. We've had the rise of legal writing as a core part of training new law students to prepare for entering practice. So it's not as though it's pure theory all the time in law school. And I think it's a little bit different because the market forces that impact law schools are different from market forces that would impact, a for-profit company, for example, or even a law firm, as we're seeing law firms start to feel the impact of market forces. But one of the outcomes of this divide is that most of the thought around what law students need for their first employment opportunities out of law school takes place in the career strategy office or the professional development center of a law school. Not as much of that conversation explicitly tied to employment outcomes happens in the tenured faculty arena, although those are the stakeholders who make the decisions about what goes into the core curriculum. So I think that piece, that divide, is something that really holds law schools back in some ways from really being responsive to the changing demands of practice. And I'll cite my friend and colleague, Alice Armitage, who recently stepped down from her long-term role at UC San Francisco. And Alice has talked about how the first year in particular, which is the year when everything is required and consistent across the board, is really designed to produce appellate lawyers in the way that we teach appellate case law and the way that we focus on oral argument, when most people are not going to pursue careers in appellate law. But at the time, again, in those early days, that was really the predominant feature of legal education. So I think that there are elements that really structurally impede us from responding quickly to the moment. But I would love to hear your thoughts about whether you think that law schools suffer from innovator's dilemma or whether they're different in some ways than other organizations.
Well, I think I agree with everything you've said. I do think that they're different in some important ways, and then not different in some ways that make this an opportunity for some disruption in the, legal education market, which is separate from, I think, the rest of the legal market. But it still is a market, right? Consumers are still making choices about where they want to spend a whole lot of tuition dollars, and how they want to, approach their learning. And I mean, you and I have talked many times about the way law school ranking systems are done, and the way that ranking system inhibits innovation. And I think that there's a little bit of an opportunity, a sort of an innovator's dilemma opportunity for some scrambling in at least the way consumers think about what law schools they want to go to. At least it feels possible to me that if you're thinking about spending a whole lot of money on 3 years of education for a profession that's changing very quickly right now, you're probably going to want to pay attention to something other than what US News and World Report says about where that law school falls on these rankings that used metrics that were relevant, 20 or 30 years ago, but are going to be a lot less relevant 3 years from now and 5 years from now and 10 years from now. And you probably are going to want to figure out where are the places where I can go learn about the ways in which this technology is going to change the profession, because I want to be the kind of lawyer who graduates from law school and is ready to, have an impact, and also get a job. So I think there is, and maybe it's sort of like a mini innovator's dilemma within a, very bespoke marketplace. But I do think there are opportunities for the Suffolk law schools of the world to leapfrog a lot of other law schools that US News and World Report would have said are ranked ahead of Suffolk for some metric that I don't think anyone's going to care much about in a few years. So if they care now, I'm not sure if they care now, but I don't know. Those are my thoughts. It's going to be fascinating to see what happens, I do think.
It's interesting too, because when somebody's writing the history of this period of legal education, generative AI sort of came on the heels of a lot of schools starting to step back from the US News rankings, for all the reasons that you suggested, as well as reasons, that don't prioritize the ability to be more inclusive in recruiting student body. So we're sort of in an era where the US News rankings are already susceptible to being less important. My suspicion, I, and I'm guessing this, but it's also informed by a couple conversations I've had with prospective law students, is that because there's currently not another framework to use to select law schools, is that prospects continue to use the US News rankings right now to make decisions. So I wonder, whether you would have advice for people thinking about going to law school about why they should move beyond the rankings and what they should actually be looking for in their law schools.
Yeah, I think this is such a great question, and to the extent people out there listen to this at all, I do think this is a really important moment to look far beyond both the rankings and even the marketing materials that schools are producing about what their curriculum does and doesn't do. I mean, well, does do. There aren't that many marketing materials on what they don't do, but that would be kind of cool, actually. We're not good at so if you want to do that, go to that over law school. Um, I could do those materials, by the way, for a lot of schools.
That would be fun.
I have this in my head. We should do this. But I think you want to actually, ask questions of figure out who the right person is. Probably somebody who's an administrator, not necessarily a faculty member. Faculty members tend to be focused on their research and their own teaching, and especially during the semester, I think it's hard for them to have a sense of what else is happening in the law school, in and around the law school. So I think you might want to find the administrator whose job it is to help you think through this important question and ask these very specific questions about how they're approaching learning, professional development, and the changing profession as a result of generative AI. I would have my list of questions about this topic ready to go, and I'd go find a person and ask them. You don't have to go physically; you can call them, you can Zoom them, but I would want to ask those questions. But yeah, what do you think? Well, what do you tell? You must have people asking you this already. Do you have advice?
Yeah, I mean, most relevantly, my stepdaughter thinks about going to law school, so I talk with her a lot. And just because of the roles I've had, I have people connect prospective students to me. Some of my advice is exactly the same as it would have been 5 or 10 years ago, which is if you're just graduating undergrad, I definitely recommend taking a couple years to work to figure out what you actually enjoy doing, and whether that aligns with what lawyers actually do on the ground day to day. I think to the credit of law schools, they have done a good job in the last 10 years of really looking for students who have prior work experience to make sure that they are really attending law school for thoughtful reasons and informed by professional experience. So I do think that's a good change. But I think the additional piece here is not only learning about yourself and what you like, but seeing how things unfold in the next few years in the profession and what the life of a lawyer looks like 3 to 5 years from now, and whether that is something that you're really interested in pursuing. And then to your point, I think really interrogating the offerings of around generative AI and technology generally. One thing we didn't really talk about on the description of law school education is because of the centrality of critical thinking and understanding the substance of the law. In many cases, law schools are not as focused on thinking about how technology is integrated into practice to do things beyond those core sort of thinking like a lawyer, critical thought, legal research and writing aspects of it. So I would want to know, what is the history of your school in terms of thinking about technology as part of preparation for being a lawyer? Is that integrated into the core curriculum, or are they only electives that are offered? Do you have tenured faculty members who focus on not just the substance of technology law, but actually how to use technology in practice? And then I think you just said something that made me think of another piece, which is like the metacognition and lifelong learning piece. Is the world is changing too quickly to have 3 static years of your life prepare you for the rest of your profession. So, how does your school help me understand how I learn as a lawyer and what skills I'll need to upskill myself beyond CLE every year in a rapidly changing world? And I'd be really curious actually to know the answers from some schools on that last piece, because it's a lot harder to sort of conceptualize and communicate and integrate into curriculum.
That's super helpful. While you were talking, I was thinking like, yeah, some of the things I would want to learn right now are sort of leadership, change management, creativity and collaborative work arrangements with unusual partners. And like, those are things that are, they're not in the traditional curriculum, at law schools. There are some law schools that teach a leadership course. In fact, our friend Jim Sandman teaches one at Penn, which is an amazing course, I think. But there are some human skills that have become more important, and I'd want to have some sense of how the law school at least thinks about those skills and values them, and thinks that they are teaching them. I'm not saying you can't teach them within some of the traditional curriculum. I think you can. It just depends on how you're teaching that traditional curriculum. We should do a checklist for law students who are applying to law school and the kinds of things they might want to think about asking. I think that would be a useful thing for us to put out into the world.
Definitely. I think probably the word, as much information as prospective law students have, I just think probably the current changes in the profession and what they mean for your school selections has not reached the people that need it the most. And I don't know that there is even, sort of like you're saying, a checklist for what you should be thinking about in the AI era as you go to law school. So we should definitely do that. And, maybe we should do a whole other episode too, thinking about some of these things. We only have a couple minutes left, but I'm wondering what changes you would make if you could wave a magic wand and transform legal education. What do you think that the law school should be doing right now?
So with full understanding that the law schools don't have, unlimited or unfettered, freedom to just do whatever they want, because the accreditor requires them to do an awful lot of specific things. So this is not a critique of any law school that's not doing this, but you've heard me say this even before generative AI came on the scene. But I think generative AI makes it even more exciting. Is I would have law students, before they sat in a classroom and read appellate cases, spend the first few weeks in state courtrooms where people are trying to manage their justice problems, most of whom are managing them without lawyers, because most people in the U.S. can't afford lawyers. So when they started studying the law, they understood that there was an enormous set of challenges that we need their creativity and big ideas to fix. I really think we could point creative law students, before we beat the creativity out of them in law school, at some of the biggest challenges in the profession. And I now think that this technology just gives them new tools to think about how to solve those problems. And it excites me to think about giving incoming law students the power to use those tools and the information about what they might, use them for, that I think could really change some of the biggest problems in the profession. So I think it would be like a really exciting time to be a creative dean that could figure out how to do all the things that the accreditor makes you do. I understand that, but also point talented law students with these really powerful tools at some of the biggest problems in legal education. Do you know Anna Carpenter, who's now the dean at Oklahoma? Do you know her?
Yes.
Yeah.
She does not know me. I know of her because I
Yeah.
followed her when I was in law student professional development world frequently.
She's amazing, and I want to catch up with Anna and see what she's thinking about in this interesting moment, because she's always doing some pretty innovative things around access to justice, and I'm sure she's like thinking about what's possible right now. So and Andy Perlman as well, and there are definitely deans out there for whom this is going to be a really interesting moment. So yeah, I think we could have a lot more
Totally.
conversation about this if we want to take it up again in another episode.
Yeah, I think we should do that. There's so much to dig into here. And we can learn a little bit more about some of the work that you're doing at the AAA too, to partner with Suffolk and others right now to drive change in legal education. So we'll leave this here for now, but I do think there are other topics we could explore on a future episode, maybe after we've caught up with some of our favorite creative deans, and offer some helpful guidance for other deans trying to drive change. Not easy at all. So want to make it clear that we understand that as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. future episode. Tune back in.
All right. So we're going to go make some podcasts on Notebook LM with all of our documents and audio files. Maybe we'll feed our podcast into Notebook LM and have it make a new podcast and compare and contrast. It's going to get weird really fast.
Will it make us be smarter or funnier? Because then we should definitely do it.
I don't think we could be funnier. We're just hilarious. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on this edition of 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. We'll look forward to seeing you on a future episode. Until then, be well. And thank you, Bridget.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to 2030 Vision, AI and the Future of Law. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our podcast and leave a review. Stay informed and inspired as we continue to explore the AI-driven future of the legal profession. We'll see you next time.